Chapter 18. Battle for Corpus Christi. Broadcasting the call to arms in southern Texas through Ivory's shortwave radio had borne fruit beyond Riker's expectations. Nestled in ambush, he marveled at the impressive turnout of patriots ready to defend their land. As dawn's first light began to break, the distant growl of engines heralded the enemy's approach. From the outskirts of Corpus Christi, a convoy of Chinese military trucks and armored vehicles emerged, having used residents' homes as makeshift barracks after forcibly evicting them. Now they were on the move, aiming to consolidate and expand their foothold in Texan territory. "Hold! I'll fire the first shot, be ready!" Riker called out while securing an AT-4 recoilless rifle upon his shoulder. Riker and his Vanguard had been tracking the enemy's movements. Using intelligence from local informants, Riker knew that Corpus Christi was now a major supply hub for the Chinese invaders. The coastal city's strategic position made it ideal for resupplying their operations throughout Texas. "They're pushing out," murmured Jack, one of Riker's key lieutenants, as he peered through binoculars from a concealed position. Riker, sitting beside him on a ridge overlooking the road with the AT-4 at ready, nodded. "How many?" "4 armored vehicles, about a dozen trucks. And there's more in the distance," Jack reported. Riker weighed the situation. "They're confident. That's good. Overconfidence can be exploited," he thought. The Vanguard had been preparing for this. In days leading up, they had mined key choke points and established hidden sniper positions. Their goal wasn't just to halt this convoy, but to send a strong message to the Chinese. Texas would not be easily conquered. "Ready the teams. Wait for my signal. Remember, hit hard and vanish." "We cannot afford a prolonged engagement," Riker commanded. Riker's fingers clenched around the AT-4, his breathing steady but heart pounding. As the lead vehicle entered his line of sight, he mentally prepared for the precise moment to strike. Time seemed to slow as the vehicle moved into the kill zone. And then, as adrenaline surged through his veins, he unleashed the weapon's fury. Previously, due to their limited number of AT-4s, he had only practiced dry firing it, replicating the process without actually launching the projectile. But this time, the fiery backblast warmed his face, and he felt its raw, devastating power. The ambush began with a massive explosion. As the convoy approached a narrow pass, the lead armored vehicle erupted from the power of Riker's AT-4, blocking the road. Instant chaos ensued. Chinese soldiers scrambled, trying to ascertain the threat. Hidden snipers began picking off targets. Each shot was precise, maximizing damage. Explosions followed as rocket-propelled grenades, hidden in the nearby foliage, targeted the convoy's rear, cutting off any chance of a retreat. Chinese troops, accustomed to structured combat scenarios, were caught off guard by the sporadic and unpredictable strike. Their immediate instinct was to call for aerial reinforcements, but every attempt was thwarted by static interference. Unknown to them, Vanguard's tech team had infiltrated their frequencies, rendering them mute and isolated. Seizing the advantage, Riker signaled for a specialized squad to move. Swiftly, they dashed into the fray with pinpoint focus on the trucks loaded with munitions. With a lethal blend of speed and stealth, they neutralized guards protecting the vehicles. Other team members efficiently offloaded crates of ammunition and supplies, while Riker and a few others expertly placed timed explosive charges. With everything set, Riker blew on an old military whistle that his grandfather had used back in World War II, signaling their retreat. Suddenly, as the ambush begun, they vanished back into their camouflaged positions, awaiting the next phase of their ambush. Moments later, massive secondary explosions rocked the area, sending plumes of black smoke into the sky. The ambush was over. Riker's Vanguard vanished into the wilderness, leaving behind a devastated convoy. Quickly, they loaded up their vehicles and drove off to an old cattle ranch that had been shut down long before the invasion due to the poor economy. Driving their vehicles into an empty barn for cover, everyone exited their vehicles cheering with the exception of Riker. Looking around, he understood it had been an organized chaos of a battle, and now he wanted to know just how bad it had been on the Vanguard. "Quiet down! We need a head count!" Riker's commanding voice cut through the jubilation. As silence descended, he searched the faces around him. Where's Jack? I need those numbers. A heavy weight settled on his chest as he scanned the area. One of the special team members stepped forward, pain evident in his eyes. Sir, Jack. He was hit during the raid on the ammunition truck. He didn't make it. The air grew thick with grief. Riker had lost comrades before, but his bond with Jack ran deep. It was a connection he had promised himself he'd never allow again, knowing the pain it could bring. Knowing that he couldn't allow the loss of Jack show on his face, Riker began shouting out orders. Get your ammunition replaced. Eat. Drink. Get ready to move. As the minutes ticked by, Riker stood over a makeshift table, methodically reloading his spent magazines. The sudden drop in adrenaline combined with the fresh wound of losing a close comrade weighed heavily on him, pulling him into a melancholic state. But sleep and sorrow were luxuries he couldn't afford right now. The sun wasn't even at its peak, and the day stretched out before them, promising more battles. While he had once imagined a war marked by clear lines and epic confrontations, the counsel from his veteran advisors had reshaped his strategy. They suggested guerrilla warfare, the very tactics that had historically leveled the playing field between imposing armies and smaller insurgent groups. Riker's appreciation for those who had prior military experience grew with each passing day. They carried much of the logistical burden, seamlessly handling the distribution of supplies. He glanced around, taking note of the synchronized chaos. Units were systematically dividing up ammunition and resources, setting up for ambushes and attacks spread across a vast radius, forming a defensive semicircle around Corpus Christi. Henry, any updates from the northern teams? Or any word from the others? Riker inquired, silently grateful for his decision to keep Henry stationed safely at a distance, armed with a radio and camera. The thought of losing his longtime confidant was unbearable. Almost every group has checked in, except one, Henry began, the concern evident in his voice. It seems they were detected by a patrolling helicopter and came under fire. There's still no word from Ivory since our last communication. On the bright side, we're getting indications that the electronics in our vicinity are operational. This suggests we're within the southern boundary of the EMP's impact zone. Henry briefed Riker on the evolving situation, presenting good news and potentially another heavy loss. Riker called his military advisors into an urgent meeting, eager to discuss the rescue of the lost group. But as soon as he tabled the idea, they were quick to shoot it down. Riker, this is precisely why we've employed these guerrilla tactics, Major Scott began, with a concerned look in his eye. If one group gets spotted and pinned down, we can't risk the entire operation. Sending in a rescue party? That's exactly what the enemy would expect. It's a textbook trap, and it'll put more of our people right in their crosshairs. Riker, still struggling with the loss of Jack, and him not being part of this gathering, but he knew they had to move on. I get it, Scott. It's just difficult to let it be and see what happens. Trust me, I understand. Command choices are not easy, but sending another group out with no intel is asking for others to vanish. Scott replied. We do have some information coming in that the Chinese military are showing up in Dallas, sir. Lieutenant Alvarez informed the group of military advisors after speaking to a man brought to him. How the hell are they doing that? Scott questioned, confusion etched on his face. Riker pondered the news. How large are we talking about? If it's just a stray convoy or two, they won't last long in that position. As they debated, Lieutenant Alvarez continued his briefing after confirming details with the Dallas contact. Sir, from what we're hearing, it's a significant force. They seem to have emerged overnight, fortifying their position around Thanksgiving Hall. Riker's eyebrows furrowed in recognition. Thanksgiving Hall? I've been there. It's got an expansive underground network. But how in the world did they establish a stronghold there? We haven't observed any aircraft flying in that direction for weeks. The few we have spotted are en route to Corpus Christi from the south or west. How did such a sizable force suddenly appear in the heart of Dallas and set up so swiftly? Lieutenant Alvarez looked pensive. The reports have been spotty. There's been an unusual amount of activity during the night. Trucks moving, lights at late hours, and even some unusual noises. But nobody has been able to pinpoint exactly where these troops are coming from. Scott frowned. Night movements make sense. It's the best way to avoid detection. But how they're managing to move such large numbers without us noticing during the day is a mystery. Riker rubbed his temples, the weight of command evident in his demeanor. There's gotta be a blind spot we're missing. They have a strategy and it's working. We need to figure out what it is. Lieutenant Alvarez nodded. We have scouts out, trying to piece together their movements. But so far, nothing concrete. Scott leaned back, exasperated. So they're ghosts now? Appearing and disappearing at will? Riker's gaze was steely. Not ghosts, just strategic. And if they have found a way to move without detection, we need to adapt and fast. We'll reconvene once we have more information. For now, let's focus on fortifying what we have and gathering intel.